Welcome home, friends. I'm Tanya Long, and this is Reset, where purpose meets possibility. Each week, we share conversations with thought leaders, innovators, and the dreamers and doers who are reshaping the future of work, technology, longevity, and purpose. Whether you're navigating AI's impact, reimagining your career, or searching for deeper meaning, you're in the right place. So settle in, open your mind, and let's explore what happens when purpose meets possibility.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Reset with Tanya here at KPCRLP 92.9 FM. With every guest, I say this is my favorite person, but this one just might be my favorite person. Andreas Mueller is a digital amplifier and has been since the digital age began, because we are that old, and is moving and transitioning from his digital expertise in the world to a purpose-driven focus on AgeTech. And that transition has been going on for not very long, maybe 6 or 8 months or less. But it is a beautiful thing to see Andreas move from a digital amplifier to an AgeTech hero. Big shout out to our friends at AARP who have been working with Andreas, and my best friend's sister-in-law Karen. If you listen to this at some point, we're thrilled to have connected you guys to work together to bring technology to people that helps them as they transition through the different stages of life. It's really exciting. We're all going to live much longer. One of the tenets of the Reset podcast is around longevity, but with longevity comes, with broader longevity in the world, we're looking at a different set of needs that need to be accommodated as people physically age and mentally and emotionally age. Loneliness is a big deal, and so we'll get for the aging population and for all populations these days, actually. So we'll get more into that as we go through the conversation, but I am so happy to have my dear friend Andreas with us today. Andreas Mueller, welcome to Reset with Tanya.
Thank you, Tanya. It's great to be here. It truly is, yeah.
You're going to hear a lot of love on this show today, because we just have such deep respect for each other. Andreas,
when did we actually meet? I was trying to remember that. I think it was...
Has it just been in the last year? I think it's been in the last year.
Yeah.
That's the amazing thing about community and the way you and I drive community, because people feel like they've known each other forever, and they know all their family history, and they know what's happening in their personal lives that are important and relevant. And you feel like you've known each other for a long time, and I have that with several of you, where I recognize it's intense to live here in the Bay Area, but we also develop really intense friendships, and I'm grateful for that. So I've rattled. Why don't you tell us, what are you working on right now that excites you?
Wow. The AgeTech thing, maybe? Yeah. The way that came about was I was involved with a founders event in Portugal, and Miguel, my good buddy from the Algarve, he asked me to be a mentor and just to be generally involved in the event. This was back probably in somewhere halfway through the year last year. And by October 22nd, we were going to welcome up to 400 startups. And so I looked at so we're going to have 400 startups, and whittle them down to the finalists and have a demo day in southern Portugal, in the Algarve, the beautiful Algarve, which is a lot like our coast here. And I remember looking at the landing page, and I looked at the sectors that they were focused on. And these were sectors that just make sense for Portugal, but then also for the Algarve, for southern Portugal. And the three sectors were travel tech, okay, of course.
Interesting.
Agritech, sure, that makes sense too, really important there. I'm fishing also, but agriculture, great. And then AgeTech. And this is probably almost a year ago. I remember thinking AgeTech, and I thought, okay, whatever, I guess I can figure that one out. It just didn't sound that exciting. But then I opened up to it more and more, and it's something I've learned myself, just to open yourself up to ideas, and as, I don't know, cheesy as that sounds, it really does. It does work. And ever since then, I've just been very interested in AgeTech. I remember mentioning it to people, and everybody's reaction was, yeah, that's actually really good. And it's funny because a lot of you have to be very careful how you pronounce it, because people are not familiar with it. They think H as the letter, so it
that's
AgeTech.
interesting. Yes.
But H, what's H? What does the H stand? No, age, like senior. Okay, got it. And then I remember mentioning it to you, and your eyes just opened up wide, and you said, oh, that's it. That's it, Andreas. That's your path. And then, like, when I had your stamp of approval, I knew I can't go wrong. And I worked on this with my COO, with Brandy, who's traveling in China right now. Thank you, Brandy. And it's just been such a great journey. And yeah, thank you, Melissa, also for supporting me in this. And there's so many things I could start talking about, but I'll let you ask a question.
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good. I recognize this is a pivot that's in process. As you figure this out and figure out where to make the most meaningful impact, you've been a digital agency guy at a pretty high level for a long time, and that's been your
22 years.
22 years, my goodness. That's been a big focus.
Oh wait, 23. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a very definitive path, and then pivoting this way to something so new that you have to speak it clearly so that people don't misunderstand that it's that new. It's not a household term yet. I experienced that. You met some of my radio colleagues here before the show, and when I told them what you do, what you're pivoting into, they had the same reaction. They weren't clear what it was, and I gave them some examples.
Yep.
So you're personally pivoting, but you're also pivoting everyone in the circles that are around you for them to understand it. So what has that
That's
trend?
a good point, yeah.
Yeah, because you have a lot of circles. I'm only in a few of them, but I see the other ones through your thought leadership on LinkedIn. So I know that you have a lot of different communities that you are influential in. So what has that pivot been like for you? Rebranding yourself? Because I don't think you're leaving digital at all.
No.
I just think you're focusing in on where you can have impact with that in a more specific vertical. So what has that transition been like, helping educate the people around you and helping bring them along by developing followership for that?
So you say a pivot and a rebrand, and initially I was thinking, no, not at all. But then the more I think about it, you're absolutely right. I think, so what I've been lacking for a long time is that I've always been good at digital marketing, digital advertising. It's been my passion.
The strategic side.
The strategic
is what I
side.
see in you.
Yeah, definitely. But within that, I mean, that field is so huge. It's just such a horizontal field. It just covers everything. And then at the same time, it's covering B2B to a certain extent, B2C, sure, it's fun, but mostly B2B because it's more complex, okay? So business to business versus business to consumers. And for me, there's always been this question. I'm in a group of like-minded agencies, and within that group, we're always told to niche down and figure out, like, what is your focus? Because once you have that focus, you can always open up. But if you have that focus, you have a story to tell, and it's so much easier to tell. Wow. So even going back about 20 years, 22 years, when we first, so this was a cultural thing. I just had a podcast this morning about what I love about Portugal. So there's a lot of cultural things that are coming together for me today. I connected with a German guy. We started up Blue Fusion. And for us, it was enough just to say, hey, we do SEO, because it was so
For a long time, that's been
big.
a big market, yes.
Yeah, at the time. And I remember the big door opening for me was I was doing a presentation I think it was in Santa Cruz actually, and I was presenting on a panel, and I was next to Tony Gasparich, who was the VP of Marketing for West Marine, the boating supplier.
It's a franchise
Huge.
out here for boating. I see
exactly.
that in a lot of the coastal towns as a store, a retail store.
Yeah.
Yes.
But they're like, I'm trying to remember, let's say $800 million revenue, something like that, maybe even more than that. And the doors were open to me because I remember I was talking about SEO, search engine optimization, and so this VP of this huge company approached me afterwards and said, hey, it was great being on the panel with you. Could you do SEO for us? So it was so new, you didn't even need
all you had to
a
do was
specific niche or anything. You just said, I do this, and it's almost like AI 9 months ago. If you say, I do AI whisper, or a prompt engineer, like, wow.
Sherpa, an AI Sherpa.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so getting back to the pivot, recently I have looked at what do we actually do. So we do digital marketing, we do paid advertising, but that's like saying, I don't know, it's just not going deep. And so the thing I was lacking is the excitement of a specific vertical niche. And so what happened on the way to that decision was also opening up, and actually not even opening up, but going back to our roots of working with startups. So in the very beginning, we worked with startups, then we expanded, and then we worked with huge companies, and then suddenly we're working with multi-billion-dollar enterprises, which is great, but also can be a major pain. And so by going back to my roots, embracing that original excitement of working with Yelp that had just come to market, or Skype, or LinkedIn. We helped LinkedIn with their SEO.
Oh, wow.
It was
okay.
insane.
I did not realize that was part of your history.
Yeah. And so the other pivot, like as you termed it, which is accurate, was opening back up to startups. And working with, and as Tanya, working with startups can be very difficult. It's fun on the surface. There's so much energy.
There's exuberance and energy.
So much promise, so much opportunity.
There's also a lot of hand-holding. A lot of coaching is required because of the lack of experience and breadth in history. I think that's fair to say. Yeah.
And then also there's a lack of funding, especially if they're pre-Series A, pre-Series B. So you just have to be flexible and figure out what works. And so in a sense, getting way back to your original question, there has been like a double pivot. So going from the enterprise, re-embracing the startup, and that's where we met, just in that fertile field of startup events, startup founders, funders, and then also kind of looking at this niche and really digging down into AgeTech.
I love it. I think that you are particularly well equipped. I'll say it's not the right word, but I'll say socially equipped to deal with a lot of diversity in your life. I didn't know till I stalked you on LinkedIn for this show that you speak 7 languages, I counted. Maybe some not as fluently as other.
To a certain degree, exactly.
But to a certain degree, you speak 7 different languages. So I want to know the story on that history, why you speak 7 languages. Of course, I know that you have a European affinity focus that you execute on. But you have other things in your life just to make note of, like your wife's a chef, so you're surrounded by food as art. And you have a daughter who's trans, so I know that...
Who's a chef as well.
Who is a chef as well, that's right. And I've had her food when we were at the Ferry Building that day.
Lunette,
So you're surrounded by art, you're surrounded by diversity. I know your personal causes that we trade texts on are very much about humanity and equity and diversity. So you're a champion for love. Actually, at the end of the day, you're a champion for love. So identifying all those personal pivots for you, because those were all like reinventions, pivots. They were parts of your life that made you a fuller, richer person. So how have those life experiences translated for you into how you work with others who are launching new things or doing new things? Because I do think there's a correlation in your ability to fully see people and then to help them on their way to building something new. So how has your diversity, as a broad word, helped you to help others?
So let me go back to because there's so much to latch onto here,
Yeah.
and for me to get excited about, because I think the cultural stuff and the language is just so important.
Why 7 languages?
Going on.
And you're,
so
yeah.
Should I just dive into that?
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
okay.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting set point for who you are.
Because to me that's so important. So I grew up in Germany in a very unusual family because we were bicultural. My mom being American, my dad German. So at home when I grew up, and this was in the early 60s, going way 1960s, yeah, for the younger kids listening here.
Yeah.
And so my first language, although I was in Germany, my first language was, and I remember hearing that on tapes that my dad had recorded, was English. And I guess it makes sense. The mother is American, so you speak English, but that's a decision that my parents made because there were a lot of kind of critical forces out there saying, oh no, if he learns English, he'll be super confused once he goes to kindergarten. And for me, that wasn't an issue at all because kids are so malleable. They're
They are very
they're like
resilient.
little sponges. They just suck it all up. And so for me to be speaking English at home, and then to go to the kindergarten where nobody spoke English, there was zero English, and suddenly it's just German. You just realize, oh, it's different rules. Okay, different environments. Okay, that's cool. And so when I go back, I can use both languages, but here I just use German. So that was always, so the bicultural in the 2 languages, those were always very important for me. Then I remember, so speaking of more languages, I remember traveling and we were being in Germany or super close to France or Italy. So we'd go to France and I could hear my parents speak French and realize, oh, okay, so that's the secret ticket here. You speak the language and magic happens. And in 5th grade, I got my first language in school in Germany, which was English, which was, okay, this is easy. Although I had to be careful because sometimes I would notice the teachers making mistakes and I would want to correct them, but I was still just easy.
But see, you learned
easy.
early the value of human interaction and appropriateness, right? You knew not to be the snotty kid that said, that's not right, that verb conjugation is not right. You knew early to grace.
To be fair,
I
was a little turd as a kid, yeah.
Were you a snotty
but
kid?
No, but still,
Okay.
I mean, that learning is still there.
Yeah.
So you understand. And you just appreciate that. One of my funny anecdotes is I remember being out with my friends out in the backyard or whatever, and then speaking German. We interact in German, obviously, because that's what you speak in Germany.
Right.
And then my mother would call me from the window, 2nd floor, and she'd say, hey, come on home, we're going to have dinner ready. And I'd answer, and I think I probably answered in German, and my friends are completely perplexed, like, what is going on here? She said something, you answered in German. And then as I'm taking this in, I'm realizing, okay, so we are different, like we as a family. And yeah, and so then I was saying the next door that got opened for me in terms of languages and cultures was obviously 5th grade English. Okay, some challenges, but okay, that's easy. And then I learned French in 7th grade, and I realized this is really weird and hard because
French was my language in school.
Okay,
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
Steve Martin? He said, "Oh, those French, they have a different word for everything."
No,
And that was
Mandarin is still the hardest, but we didn't learn that for a long time. Yeah.
But for me, there's just this additional realization that, hey, you've been in a protected world because you got the English and the
bubble.
German covered, and you're like very special for just even for my greater family, because we had professors in our family and they spoke some English, but
Right.
but they just didn't have the aptitude and the comfort. And so learning French, I realized this is hard. I have to actually sit down and memorize things. And in a sense, that also forced some doors open for me, some doors of maybe lack of comfort. We can just
Perseverance.
see. Yeah.
without comfort. Yeah.
Yeah, but you realize that you get into this track of English and German, American and German culture, and you think that's it. And then this other culture comes to you and you think, oh, this should be easy. And you realize, no, it's very different. The way they count. Like even the French concept of 76 is 60-16, which is 60 plus 16, so 76. What are you thinking? What is going on? Just these bizarre concepts. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm tracing this all back to Noah's Ark. If they had just stuck with one language, right? But no, or the Tower of Babel, either in my tradition, the tradition that I grew up educated in. I'm thinking about all these points in our history where we broke into these different languages. And I think that speaks to, for you recognizing early on that we do have differences. We are not all built the same. And isn't that a marvelous thing? I think that's I would characterize you as living your best life, embracing all the differences.
I can't deny that.
Yeah, that is entirely who you are.
Right.
Yeah. So how did, actually, you said France. Give me 1 second because I need to do a quick station ID and talk about this weekend. It's a horrible segue, but it's the only one I can pull, is wine and France. And France is so known for wine, but so is Northern California. So if you enjoy wine, this weekend, the Los Gatos Chamber of Commerce is hosting the annual, they've been doing this for 15 years, I think, the Los Gatos Wine Walk. So Saturday, come see us. The station will be broadcasting live from the courtyard outside with a couple of bands. It's going to kick up. So if you want to drink 30 different kinds of wine, you'll need a ticket from Eventbrite. But if you just want to come and enjoy a day when Los Gatos is certain to be filled with interesting people and interesting things to do, and stop by the station at 59 North Santa Cruz and might be interviewed live. You definitely enjoy some really interesting talent and bands, and that is this Saturday, the 26th of April. So back to you, Andreas.
I might have to check that out.
Yeah, I'll be here. I'll be here at 10 a.m. on Saturday morning doing studio tours, and I encourage you to come by. And
so we could have had a really easy segue here. You were saying French and French wines.
That's the only thing I could grab.
I used to work in the wine industry.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
See, you've got all kinds of valuable skills.
These
now,
little secrets.
Is the wine industry, why did you develop you were already on a path to know multiple languages. Did the wine industry enhance that for you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so interesting history. So let me continue with the languages because then everything will make sense.
Perfect.
So then I take French in school starting in 7th grade. I realized it's tough. Push myself. I'm okay. I'm not that great a student in French because it's frustrating, right? You just feel like, hey, this should be easy, but it's not. Then we moved, this was at the end of 9th grade. We moved to the US in 10th grade. And then obviously it makes sense. I remember I took all these crazy things, physics and chemistry, geometry, English, literature, and what else? Oh, French, obviously, and German is another foreign language, and obviously German literature. And so I ended up being in, I think it was French 3 probably, like the 3rd year, but I did really well because I had the foundation already. And I realized this is cool because I'm ahead of the curve. And now I can drive, so I'm not behind trying to catch up, but I'm actually ahead on the racetrack and I'm leading the pack, and it just felt exciting. And I was involved in a trip to Montreal that we did. Then I went to college and I majored in German. Originally it was like a scientific focus, physics, calculus, and German and French, and then it ended up just being German and so that the whole language stuff kind of.
Something that I hear in the story that you just shared is that you enjoyed being out ahead of the pack. So we wouldn't have called that thought leadership in the 7th grade, but you enjoyed being on the far edge of saying, this is neat, hey guys, come along. You enjoyed that notoriety, I would call it. And I think that's probably similar to your recent connection to AgeTech, because it is something not everyone knows about yet, not everyone's doing. So how has that thought process where you enjoy being an early adopter, how do you think that translated into your connection into AgeTech?
So I just made another connection as we're talking this
People
through.
tend to do that when they're behind a mic with me. They're like, I never thought about it before. And that's the beauty of us being here together. So anyway, so you made another connection. Tell us about it.
No, I was just thinking, just this being ahead of the pack, but then you look behind you and you want to educate, which has always been really important to me. And now I'm seizing this idea a lot better. So in college, I focused on French, had a French major, French German, and I was able to teach French, and I got paid for it in college. I was like a teaching assistant, but in college, where that's very unusual. And then I went to graduate school to UC Davis, and one of my selling points was that I had taught in college already, so now I could be a TA. And what I truly love is taking concepts and simplifying them for other people. Understand,
That's a skill.
Figuring out the subjunctive French, for example, and really simplifying it, just giving a few rules just so it's not as scary anymore. And I loved being a TA at UC.
I think you're
UC
a natural
Davis.
teacher.
It was so much fun, And I was actually disappointed that if you get, my trajectory was to get a PhD and then teach languages. And it was a little disappointing to see that the focus is publishing. And teaching French, nobody cares about. It's just the publishing very bizarre medieval concepts that nobody's ever talked about before. That's what gets you ahead. But being a motivating professor or teacher, not so much. And so I think this all ties together into.
It started with languages because that's what was available to you as a child. And you were, I think, fortunate that you were in a family that was multicultural, I think was the word you used, and definitely multi-language, and then you adopted those languages as you went through school, and that worked into a life way of being that you sought diversity. So you were interested in languages, then you married a woman at some point along the way, Suzanne.
We met in graduate school.
And it was, because I know y'all been married like forever. But
since 92.
Since 92, wow. That's fantastic. And then had 2 beautiful daughters. So you've leaned artistically. The languages are artistic. Marrying a chef, marrying a chef and then having a daughter who's a chef. You've definitely got art in your family as a priority, being artistic, expressing yourself, which is to me so different from the way we often show up in tech. So you serve tech. You have all this, if you will, artistic trending in your personal life, and it's clearly important to you. But the tech audience that you serve and interface with in your professional life can often be very driven and transactional and myopic. I love my tech life that I've had since the 90s. It can be very not artistic if we're not careful. And I think you bring the artistic side to it. Tell me how that life you've built, your personal life, has helped you pivot as you've become an SEO king, helping LinkedIn with SEO. That's a story. And then moving now into AgeTech. How is your love for diversity and, I'll just say, art as a generality, how has that helped you pivot into dealing with so many different waves of technology?
I love that question because it forces me to go back as well and kind of look at some of the pivots. I guess the biggest pivot in my life was when I decided to leave graduate school after my master's.
That was still the biggest pivot of your life?
That was, no,
I'm just calling attention to it.
At the time.
Thank you, because you've had...
To me,
at the time, that makes a lot of sense.
The logical progression was to get a PhD, because that's something that's something I'd seen in my family. It's what you do. But just to kind of leave that behind because it didn't seem right. And then what we ended up doing, we moved to Mill Valley because that's where Suzanne lived, and we found a job in San Francisco. My first job was in the wine industry. And then people asked me, because then I got into wine selling and then marketing, and then it all just took off. Here's, you need to put a pin in technology and the early internet. We can cover that in a bit. But what happened, from my perspective, it made sense. I get so many questions about, oh wait, you were working on a PhD, you were working on a degree in French literature, the theater of the 20th century. So why are you doing marketing? That doesn't make any sense. To me, that actually does make a lot of sense, because it's what you just described. It's that movement from
blending
the arts, the culture into, let's say, digital marketing. But the way I perceive marketing is it's really listening. And speaking and learning a language is listening as well, because you're listening to, so how did she say that? Let me try to repeat that. What does she mean here? And if you can take that ability and apply it to marketing specifically, that just means, hey, you're a competitor, you're doing it this way. Let me not just assume that we all have to do it the way we think the features should be, but let me look at what you're doing. Maybe I can learn from you. Same with prospects or clients. Like listening to your clients and understanding this is their language. I need to focus in on that and see, maybe we can adjust things a little bit. So instead of push, just let's
your value
develop.
Is in your strategic ability and your ability to hear in a time when it's hard for people to listen. Everyone in the world, according to Tanya, we don't have enough listeners. We have people really scraping to be heard. And when people learn to listen is when they learn to learn.
That's one, I'm just going to interject this. That's one thing I really appreciate about your podcasts. You actually listen. Like you delve into, not the questions you're asking, and here's what's next, but you listen to what your guests are saying and you dive into them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity. It's a selfish opportunity for me to learn. And to everyone I have on, I love. Even some people that I have just met. There's an actor in LA that I interviewed early in the podcast, and Matt Drago, just did his first movie, and I love Matt Drago. Didn't really know him until I got connected to him to do this. But every single person I'm with, I develop another place in my heart, a little chamber in my heart that they have a place in, because people are so remarkable.
Isn't that great,
right?
though? Yeah.
But I'm biased on that front, but I think we all need to learn to listen more. And I realize you and I, we live in a bubble here in the Bay Area.
Yep.
And people are moving so fast,
and
they
bubble,
just want the sound bite. And it's a beautiful bubble, but I am really conscientious about modeling for people true listening and the desire to wait it out, to understand what people are about and what the stories are they want to share. I think it's important for our personal success. For us, the more we know about people, the more we carry around about others, the better we are at community. And the better we are at community, the better we are at spreading what it is that we want to do in this world and having greater reach.
And wasn't there a study recently on longevity and looking at all of the factors in terms of like access to healthcare and medication and money? But if you divide them all up and you look at community as a factor, that's the highest ranking factor. If you have friends in a community, that has the biggest impact on the length of your life, which is
and there was
crazy,
a study 10 years ago in the corporate world about people who have friends at work are happier at work. They stay longer, tenures in those companies. There have been several studies on this front about it's healthy to have relationships at where you work, because then you're more committed to that workplace, because it's part of who you are outside of your personal life and family. The family that you create at work has long been understood to be an important thing, and I think that the studies we're seeing now on aging and longevity are just a continuation of that great human need where people need people.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Quick station ID, take 30 seconds, but we are listening to KPCRLP 92.9 in Los Gatos, and I finally see the sun clipping through the clouds. It was a very overcast morning, but Los Gatos is always beautiful with any weather. Also from KMRT LP 101.9 FM out of Santa Cruz, and I'm, without saying too much, Andreas hails from the Santa Cruz area. So he came over the mountain to be with us this morning. So, Andreas, we were talking about listening and depth, and you bring such depth to what you do.
Thank you.
You truly do. Anyone who knows you knows that about you, that you take the time to listen, but then the insights that you bring forward change the game. And that's why you've been so good at everything you've done, because as you do these little micro pivots in life, you bring insights to the game. I think
Listening is hard. It's really
it is, because we're all smart and we've all got these innate, I've gotta, me. It doesn't change much. You do it in second grade and you do it when you're 52. To share. There's a great desire to share. Yeah. So you wrote recently on LinkedIn, I think this is a transition for us, about the value of non-flashy events. Do you remember that post a few weeks ago about non-flashy events and meaningful connections? I think you are uniquely equipped and a role model for how you build community. How do you think community supports people in their pivots? You were just talking about aging and the studies that show that community and people are part of successful aging. So for you, how do you see the communities that you are involved with contributing to each other's success as everyone in those communities is pivoting into new enterprises, new skills, the people that have just moved here? There's 1,000 pivots in any group that you and I are in. So how has your life experience shown you that community helps us in these pivots?
The community is absolutely vital for these pivots.
Sounds like a speech, because we talk community all the time. But we do. But we love it.
We do, yeah. So you're saying supports your pivot. I was thinking of Tanya, and I was thinking that, Tanya, you supported my pivot into AgeTech. You actually didn't just support it, you drove it, like as a very positive force. So let me just be specific. I mean, we all have ideas, we bounce them off of each other.
We need to hear that our ideas have merit.
Right, yes, yeah.
When they do, and we need to hear that they stink when they don't have merit.
Yes,
that's equally important.
I trust you so much. And I remember when we were talking AgeTech, and you had this very positive reaction. And then he also said, oh, I know somebody at the RP, and I just come back from CES. I had been to
you had seen their huge booth.
Pavilion, their massive
pavilion. I called it a booth, but it sounds enormous.
Because to me, a booth is, it was, how big was this? I don't even know. It's just massive. And I was so impressed because I met up with startups. I talked to them. They were actually interested in what we were doing, how we could help them. And then you said, I know somebody at the AARP, and the AARP is nothing to sneeze at.
Karen.
Yeah, I know.
Shout out to Karen.
It's a $1.8 billion association, the largest association in the U.S., larger than the NRA. And they have 38 million members, almost 40 million.
Wow.
It's huge. And so again, this is the human part. This is community. This is something that would not have happened on Zoom. It would not have happened within LinkedIn. It would not have happened within some kind of a digital tool, as much as I love digital. It was you hearing my pivot, supporting me and saying, oh, wait, I think I can make this introduction. You made the introduction. We're still working with her. There's a lot of things going on that I can't talk about.
Of course.
But it's really exciting. And she introduced me to Andy Mueller. And to me, the amazing thing is, when I lived in Germany, my name was Andy because it was just a lot cooler than Andreas, which is very standard in German. And Miller is the Anglo-Saxon equivalent of Mueller. And so I thought, this is me. This is, wow.
This is serendipity.
There's something's going on. And so he's the guy who actually helped create the whole AgeTech movement pivot within the ERP.
Oh, okay.
He's on the board. He's always there at CES. He heads the summit that I'll be going to in DC in May. And so I met him, and everything just took off. It was Tanya verifying, yeah, you're on the right track. This is it. You go. And then suddenly there's Karen, and then there's Andy Miller, and it all makes sense. It all came together.
And so a lot of people look at our communities that aren't in them as social. And there is a big social element I think we miss. Those of us who have traditionally been in a corporate office environment, and we don't do that as much anymore. So I think there is a heavy social component, these communities that we're involved with, but they are also the people we used to sit down at the break table. I've got my little bunny ears, my little quote marks in the air, the break tables, and talk about our ideas casually. These communities now serve as those break tables. I've never said that before, but it feels right. Maybe feels old. But to get input, to get validation that we're on the right track. And that gives us confidence. And it gives us more reason to pursue new things, because you need support when you're pursuing new things. It's scary to go out on these paths, and I think the validation's important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which it makes me think of Shack 15.
Yeah.
Which is
everything makes you think of Shack 15. You're like their biggest ambassador. Everybody. But it's a wonderful.
And so just kind
please
of
do your
going.
Thing. Yes.
Getting into what you were just saying about community and kind of the social aspect of it, it's always difficult for me to explain what Shack 15 is because it's so much.
It's more than a work.
Some people perceive it as a co-working environment, which Shack 15 vehemently denies because there's a long history to this as well. It has to do with COVID, et cetera, but they feel like, no, we're so much more. We're not just co-working. Co-working is a component of it. They, interestingly enough, they call themselves a social club. They're in the Ferry Building in a beautiful location in downtown San Francisco. It's my second office. I hang out there every Tuesday. But to me, it's really it's like a home of entrepreneurs. It's like an entrepreneurs
club. It's a
club.
community.
It is. It's in a weird way. It's a true community because it's everything. They have food there, and so this is something that never bugged me. But they say you can't bring in your own food because they want to avoid having just stuff that's a higher level idea, aesthetic. But I love that you can order food to your table. They have fantastic coffee and snacks and lunches that they're cooked. There's a kitchen right there. And it's social plus the view, the venue, plus food, which is so important for. I was just doing this podcast this morning about Portugal, and we just talk about food because it brings us together. But it's also the work side. It's also the kind of marketing yourself and finding amazing startups and entrepreneurs like ourselves and investors. And that's why I like Shack 15 so much, because it all comes together. But it's this definition. What is it? It's like, wow, it's really hard. Because in a sense it's everything, but that kind of cheapens it in a way, but not at all.
Now, Shack 15 is not your only community. It's one that you adore, right? I think about your work in Pavilion. You're a leader in Pavilion. And because you have these different groups, and let's not fail to mention Ignite. I want to close out today with Ignite because we've got a big event coming up. But
Love those guys.
of course, hi Jess. So, hey, you too, Bill.
Yeah, Bill.
Of course, because we've got to. But you've been in these communities, and you are senior in these communities. You stand tall. You're a tall pole in the tent in these organizations. So you are part of a lot of different reinventions that are occurring. You, no doubt, you speak with 50 people every time you are at an event at night. So you're helping people with their transitions, because everybody is moving forward into something else. What are the patterns after all these years of this networking? But it's more than networking, it's community building and support. What have you noticed that you think are the key factors or the common shared experiences that are making people successful in making transitions?
So I think, yeah, it's the support system that you have around you. And in a weird, simplistic way, it's, if I make introductions for somebody, I just met somebody at Shack 15, a German kid that I really wanted to help. And so I made introductions, and I try to be very deliberate, also very professional. I don't just, to me, it's really hard when somebody starts a group DM with you and somebody else, and the introducing party, and then just says, hey, here, you guys meet up, and I mentioned your name, have at it. That to me is so difficult because it's completely lacking communication. There's no segue.
And connection.
There's no introduction. There's no, what's in it for me? Like, what does this guy need? But if I can make an introduction, I can say, hey, I think you could help this guy and he might be able to do something. Would you mind if I made an introduction? And then I might get another question from you, then I can answer that. But just to have just a thought out process for these introductions. So it's more of a professional segue.
Yeah. Introductions should be curated.
Yes.
And you have a responsibility when you're making introductions. I've been hot dropped so many times into just people, and I'm like, please don't do that.
So irritating.
And it is, and I think people just don't know until they experience what it's like to be curated in your introduction to someone, to be delivered to another party, because both sides are important to the person making the introduction, and for them to do it well, to set people up for the best possible bridge so that they understand each other's value. It's a skill, it's a gift, and really it elevates us who do it that way, who curate those connections, because those connections are going to stick, because they've been set up appropriately.
Yep.
So you mentioned a kid, so I'm going to do another. It seems like these have come on top of each other, it feels like. But showing people a way to something new, and then you mentioned a kid. I'm sure they were 20, but KPCR 92.9 is doing a radio camp this summer, starting in June, for junior high, early high school age kids. So information is on our website. That's kpcr.org. But I think that's something that you and I, in particular, with the audiences that we're with, would be able to introduce to people locally who have those teenage kids who are looking for something meaningful to do this summer. Speaking comfortably, publicly, is an important skill, but wrapping it around a radio delivery is fun and a great community for us to be creating with that age kids, so that they have something to create, something specific and unique. So I just wanted to let our listeners know that we are delivering that camp this summer starting in June, and look for specific details, dates, time of day on our website. I think community starts early, and we have to give our kids opportunities to create community with things that they enjoy doing.
Let me just sneak in a little comment. Speaking of kids, I think one of the things that we did really was to decide to homeschool our kids.
I didn't know that you homeschooled.
And the reason behind it wasn't to narrow down their education down a certain path, but really to open it up. And the opportunities that we had, because we were homeschooling, it was difficult, but we were able to, so they enjoy music, and playing music. They learned to play the violin, then it became the fiddle.
Yes.
And my older daughter plays the cello. And that afforded us the luxury of being able to send them to fiddle camps and music camps, because those often overlap with school, and it's
Yes.
very difficult. And they're like a week. They could be like 5-6 days, but they're so amazing in terms of just it's a venue often in the woods, and it's just mind expanding for our kids, and it's so different because you're assembling around music and musical instruments, and you're jamming together, and there's community, there's food, and yeah, I just wanted to
Yeah, but you started it early with them.
slide that in there.
One of my
Yes.
Airstream family members down in Carmel Valley, if he's not Airstreaming on the weekends, he's at a bluegrass festival because he is an amazing fiddle player.
Oh, okay.
And that's his community, right? There's
Yeah.
food, there's music, and there's people who enjoy both.
Yep.
And my friend Carl, shout out to you, Carl. He is an amazing musician, but I think it's the community that keeps him focused on his music because it gives him a tribe to gather with. So
Right.
finding these
Right.
tribes, these communities that we have, is so important moving into this better life, that as we live longer, I'm bringing it back to AgeTech, as we live longer, we need more things that give us joy.
Yep, and it's
Yeah.
not just work. Yeah.
And it's not just work.
Definitely not, yeah.
I think you spend a lifetime developing and curating the list of things that you enjoy. And things shift as we physically shift things. There may be a day when it's hard for me to pull a 6,000-pound Airstream. But I'm not worried about that, because along the way I will be finding, through the communities I'm in, things that I enjoy that are pivots.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the pivots that you have made in your life, what do you think has made you so successful? You homeschooled your kids, you got a house full of artists, you work in tech. What do you think at your root has made you successful at that?
I think there's something that I just recently learned, and this was, you're a teenager, a hothead. I mean, it wasn't that bad, but I wasn't the most patient human being. I think
You are very patient now.
Yeah. And I try to be very calm, because that it helps people around me too. If I'm managing people or just interacting with people, just bring it down a notch, like, it'll be okay, here's the worst that can happen, now let's move forward. And to me, that's been like a huge learning experience. I'd say recently, in the last 10 years maybe, something like that. But just the patience, and I think it's brought me so much. Patience, it also fits in with listening, right? Because if you're patient, you can sit there and just open your ears and understand what that person's actually asking you. So yeah, just to, because people look at us and they think, oh man, they've got it all figured out. No, not at all.
Far from it.
Not at all. We're always, like you said,
It's the journey.
it's nice to say pivot because it sounds like we know what we're doing, but you pivot because you're
happens.
scared out of your
Right.
wits.
And we're trying to fill a gap. Gaps
Right.
happen in life, but they happen for
Yep.
us, not to us.
Yep. I guess the thing I've also learned is that if I'm having a really bad moment, a moment of just horrible fear about the future, about what could happen, like with a business or a client who's left or something like that, I look back, and I'm sure we're entrepreneurs, but it's really true. So we look back and we realize, oh, you know what? This kind of happened a year ago. Is this issue still like a burning hot concern? No, it's gone. It's resolved. I dealt with it. It's okay. And so just to have that, I guess what I call patience here too, is just to look at that and to realize it will be okay. Just try to take it down a notch and, you know, lower the flame a bit, and
But you
we'll
have
get
more
through
than
this.
patience. You have purpose in everything you do. 20 years ago, today, I think you have clarity of purpose, and that purpose can ebb and flow. They switch, transition to new things. But that sense of purpose that you carry is also the nature of who you are. So what advice would you give to our listeners who are in that maybe that gap period where they're looking to reinvent themselves, and they may be actively or not looking for their next layer of purpose. What is your advice to them?
I would say find a community, but align with an ally or a mentor that you feel comfortable with, who actually listens, who's patient, who can give you some ideas, who can support you, because I think that is so, and just that human part, because they're all the tools in the world, and there's AI and ChatGPT and Sharp, whatever. But just having this person, so I really admire my brother who's gay. He used to work, he's very active in the LGBTQ community, and he used to work with IBM. And within IBM, there's a lot of openness to supporting the LGBTQ family.
Yeah.
And he was very involved in mentoring and reverse mentoring. And so the reverse mentoring we don't deal with that a lot. But it's a kid who's this 25-year-old hire who's being mentored by this super intelligent, leadership-driven VP, and there's so much value that can be passed both ways. Obviously, the VP can say, "Hey, don't worry about it.
But both ways.
We got you covered." Yeah, and I'm just where I was in the '60s. Oh my God, like we've come so far. But then the kid also saying, "Hey, here's what I'm seeing." Both parties really getting something out of it.
And recognizing that. The 50-year-olds, just as a group, have to recognize that there's so much value for us to learn from
Oh my God.
the younger people around us. And I think we're coming to that.
Perseverance, energy,
Right.
positivity.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to do this again. We will have to have more conversations. In the meantime, where can people find you? If people have heard something today that resonated with them and they want to follow you on LinkedIn, not stalking, follow you, but follow you on LinkedIn, what's the best way for them?
So the best place is really
see you.
LinkedIn. Just direct DM me on LinkedIn. Yeah.
And they can find you at
On LinkedIn.
Andreas Mueller?
Oh man, it's like search. Wow.
Okay.
Something at
So
search.
Andreas Mueller, Muellerer.
Muellerer.
Perfect.
Yep.
Perfect.
And also look up Blue Fusion is my company, BLOOFUSION.
Perfect. I'll put that in the show notes
Fantastic.
for when we publish this. So
Much,
it has
much better than email. Yeah, I get so many emails. I just
Yeah.
don't. Yeah.
It's been wonderful. So thank you. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for showing us today not just AgeTech, but a different way of looking at life's transitions and being patient with yourself as you continue to evolve and find new things that are going to excite you and give meaning into the world. It's been wonderful to have you here.
Tanya, thank you so much. This has been incredible.
We'll do it again.
What a great journey.
Wonderful. Thank you. So everyone, we've been listening to Reset with Tanya on KPCR LP 92.9 FM here in increasingly sunny Los Gatos. We will see you next week. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on Reset. Remember, transformation is a journey, not a destination. So until next time, keep exploring what's possible. I'm Tanya Long, and this is Home. This is Reset.